listen. 1, 2, 3, 4. And sharpen their decision making. Okay. Drive execution without authority. Project gone by. Okay, you can have the best learning strategy in the world, but if you cannot execute it, it doesn't matter. And here's where it gets messy. Learning and development professionals are in this wild situation where we're expected to drive learning for the entire organization, or perhaps you support all of the frontline leaders or leadership in a certain department or all the sales reps. Yet we don't manage any of those people. We don't sign off on their budgets. We don't have control over their KPIs. And yet we're supposed to guide them, influence them, and make change happen. And if you're external, it becomes even trickier because now you're not only expected to deliver, but you have to convince the business to spend more money outside of you when they're already investing in you. What if you need software? What if you need design support? What if you need a subject matter expert in something that you're just not skilled in? Now you're asking the company that's already spending money on you to spend money on something else, and that can feel like walking a tightrope. And I have been there. I have led multi-million-dollar projects where I wasn't technically the lead. I had zero budget, zero direct reports, and I wasn't even invited to the main project update meetings. But when things went wrong, recruitment stalled, software crashed, or when other vendors missed deadlines, it all impacted me. And I have seen that when things don't go according to plan, it's L&D that gets blamed. It was a training issue, and that happens whether it was in our control or not. So in this video, we are going to cover how to lead learning projects when you don't have authority, how to manage multiple stakeholders and vendors when they don't report to you, and how to stop drowning in execution so you can actually lead. Okay, let's jump right into part 1, which is the unique leadership challenge in learning and development. Because if you think about it, we are probably the most cross-functional person or department in the entire organization. We impact everyone. HR, operations, sales, finance, IT, you name it, we impact them. But the reality is we don't own any one of those teams. We are just handed a learning request and expected to make it happen. And this creates a leadership challenge that most other people don't face. Sales leaders manage sales teams. Finance departments manage budgets. But L&D, we need to lead with influence, not authority. And here is the real problem. Because L&D is still seen as a support function, we are often brought in too late. By the time people are asking for training, the strategy has been set, the budgets have been decided, and we are left scrambling to fit learning into a plan where we weren't involved. Does that sound familiar? But here's what I want you to know, and this is research backed. Managing up and down and across is actually a super strength, and in fact is one of the drivers that makes the biggest business impact. In fact, senior leaders who have been shown to mobilize their bosses and colleagues have a 50% bigger impact on the business. And yet, how often do we think of mobilizing across, up and down as a core function of our role? Okay, so let's get into part 2, which is the more nitty-gritty around project leadership versus people leadership. And spoiler alert, you need both. And this is one of the key reasons why L&D struggle to execute effectively. We assume that just because we manage projects well, that everything will fall into place. If we meet the deadlines, the milestones, we're tracking the budget, all of that good stuff, then we are good to go. But I can tell you from experience that that is just not true. There are two distinct types of leadership, and that is project leadership and people leadership. And if you don't intentionally develop both of those skills, you will find yourself just spinning your wheels, feeling like you're doing everything but still struggling to get people on board. Okay, so let's get into what project management looks like. And this is what most people think when they think of running a learning intervention. It's really the mechanics, the budget, the timelines, the milestones, the dependencies, the approvals. And yes, it's absolutely critical, because if you don't have a handle on the logistics, everything falls apart. But project leadership alone will not get the people engaged. It won't stop people from ghosting your meetings, and it won't ensure your learning initiative actually lands with the business. So do not fall in the trap of thinking project management is enough. A perfectly planned project will still fall apart if no one cares about it. Don't focus on execution over engagement. You cannot manage people into commitment. And don't expect buy-in as a given. It is not automatic. You have to work for it. Okay, so let's get into what does people leadership actually look like when you do not lead a team. People leadership is all about how you rally others around your initiative. And this is so important, because here is a huge reality check for you. The success of your project isn't about what you do, but it's about what others choose to do. Yes, let me say that again. It isn't about what you do. It is about what others choose to do. So if your stakeholders aren't engaged, your managers aren't supporting this, your project will fall flat no matter how well you planned it. And to reiterate, this is hard in learning and development, and here's why. You're leading people who don't work for you. You cannot just say, here's the plan, take it or leave it. You have to get their buy-in. You are leading across multiple departments, each with their own priorities, their own policies, their own politics. And you're leading in a space where learning is optional. Yes, compliance training is not optional, but if you are tackling the core skills that people need, the capabilities that are going to set people up for success, that learning is often optional. So here are 3 core strategies that you can adopt for leadership in learning and development. The first one is to make people feel like they are part of the vision. People take so much ownership of things when you involve them in making the learning. So co-create it with them as much as possible. So what this looks like in action: involve stakeholders before the design process starts. Run listening sessions or observations before you come up with any solutions. Ask managers things like, what will success look like for you in your team? And then use their language. If a business leader says, we need more agile problem solvers, don't then turn around and come to them and say, oh, here's a design thinking workshop. Just use their language, even if it is a design thinking workshop. And here is one of the best shifts I have made. Instead of asking for their buy-in, ask them for their perception of the solution you're proposing. This then shifts their mindset from reviewer to owner. Okay, so getting people's buy-in is half of the problem solved. The next half is getting them to actually take action. So the second practical strategy you can take is making saying yes easy. Most resistance to learning initiatives doesn't come from disagreements. It actually comes from friction. If something feels too overcomplicated, too time consuming, too difficult, people will just check out and deprioritize the learning. So here are some ways to totally remove the friction. Make participation effortless. Make participation effortless. Instead of saying, we need managers to better lead some team meetings, create a template and offer a 5-minute how to use this template guide and send that to them. Second is to meet people where they are. If frontline leaders are basically never checking their email, but they're always on WhatsApp, connect with them through WhatsApp. Do not start an email campaign. And third is to make yes the easiest option. So instead of asking people, let me know if you want to participate, tell them, we have booked you in. Does this work for you? Yes. It's the easiest option. Okay, so we've talked about the first action you can take, which is getting people to feel ownership. The second thing that you can do is to make yes the easiest option. And now the third thing we're going to talk about is often the factor why some projects have immense success and some just stall to a dead halt. And that is make it clear how success will be measured. Here's where most L&D projects fall apart. Right? There's excitement in the beginning, there's some enthusiasm in the middle, but at the end and after, it's just fizzled to nothing. And this is because people are not seeing the clear, tangible impact of their input. And when they don't see that impact, again, they check out. So here is how to keep the momentum going. Set visible, quick win milestones. And what this looks like is instead of saying we're going to train all the managers, you can say in 30 days, we would have trained 50 managers, gathered their feedback, and so we will come back to you with their feedback summarized and clear action steps to improve. Second is to tie the results back to the business goals. If a program helped reduce turnover, please don't just show the learning metrics. Show it in terms of the business impact. And again, this can look like this training helped us save $500K in rehiring costs. Yes, that is a win. And then publicly recognize those who engage. Recognize those managers who are championing the initiative and let their results shine. Okay, so we've covered project leadership, people leadership, and how to get people engaged. Let's take this one step deeper, and that is how to influence people across the entire organization. This is influencing up, down, and across. And that is what we're covering now in part 3. All right, so now we know leadership in learning and development isn't just about leading projects, it's about leading people. But here is where it gets super tricky for L&D, is because we are leading people across departments, across teams, and none of those people report directly into you. You are managing up, down, and across, and each of these requires a different approach, and we are going to get into that now. Managing up is all about getting leadership to take L&D seriously. And let's face it, if our leadership's not on board, it is a constant uphill battle. And if you have ever had a learning initiative shut down because of budget constraints or there are other priorities, you get exactly what I am talking about. And getting executive buy-in isn't just about convincing them to do your training. It is about positioning the function as that business driver and not as a cost center. And where L&D often goes wrong, and again, I can speak from experience, we often assume that leadership sees the value of L&D. And no, this is not the case. Unless we connect L&D to the business, we are just seen as extra. We also focus on learning metrics instead of business metrics. Executives do not care about completion rates. They care about revenue, productivity, and retention. We wait to be invited into strategic conversations. If you are not proactively bringing insights to leadership, don't be surprised if they leave you out of those conversations. Okay, let's get into how to manage up effectively. The first part is speak their language, not L&D jargon. If you want your executives to listen, you have to frame the problem in a way that they care. So we absolutely do not want to say, this program will improve leadership skills. We want to say that strong leaders reduce retention by 30%. This could potentially save us $500K in reduced rehiring costs. Then we need to tie L&D priorities to the CEO's priorities. What is keeping your CEO up at night? Is it a business expansion? Then you're going to talk about how learning will equip the workforce to handle that expansion. Is it customer retention? Then you're going to talk about how the capabilities you're building in all your service-facing employees will retain the customers. Align L&D with the big picture, and suddenly it is not optional anymore. And third is to show ROI in a way that matters. One of the biggest shifts I made in my career was realizing that leadership doesn't care about how many people attended training. They just don't. They care about what changed as a result. So if your learning initiatives are reducing time to competence, increasing productivity, reducing turnover, highlight that to them. Learning should never be positioned as just a nice to have. And then another one of my pro tips is, instead of asking for budget, ask for investment. Say something like, if we invest $50K in this program, we could potentially see a $500K return by reducing turnover. Okay, that was in a nutshell managing up. Now what about managing down? What strategies can you use for that? Managing down is all about engaging the people who will do your learning as well as their managers. And yes, this is tricky for L&D because technically these people don't report into us. So we cannot say, hey, you got to attend this learning program, but we still need them to be engaged. Because even if they show up, if it is some sort of compliance training and they're just there to tick a box, we're really not making any impact at all. And we're just getting bums in seats that is completely meaningless. And here is where L&D go wrong. We assume that people will engage just because a program exists. And spoiler alert, that doesn't happen. We have to make sure it's relevant to them. We focus too much on compliance and not enough on motivation. People do not learn anything if they're supposed to. They learn if it means something to them. And we rely a lot on mandatory training instead of intrinsic motivation. If the only reason people are attending learning is because they have to, we're not going anywhere. Okay, so now how to manage down effectively. The first thing we can do is make learning a pull and not a push. So instead of forcing learning on people, create a demand for it. Make it so relevant that they are banging down your door to attend that training. Think about things that people are naturally drawn to. TED Talks, YouTube channels, Why? Why are they drawn to that? It is because it feels personal, immediate, and valuable. The second thing we can do is create clear, what's in it for me messaging. If you want people to take your learning seriously, instead of saying something like, attend this leadership training course, you will be a better leader, say, people who attend this leadership course are promoted quicker because they are better leaders. Tied into something that they want. Leverage managers as learning champions. People might attend your learning because they get an email to say they have to, but they will attend and be engaged and actually apply what they learn based on what their manager prioritizes. If the manager isn't bought in, the employees aren't either. So equip your managers, equip them with talking point, conversation guides, just anything that helps them reinforce the learning back at work. And here is my pro tip. Instead of just launching a program, create buzz around it before it even happens. Have managers talk about it in town halls if you have those. Talk about success stories of people who have attended. Get people excited to attend before it's even available. Okay, we've talked about managing up, managing down. Now let's talk about probably the trickiest part is managing across. This is the real test in learning and development leadership. It is how well we can manage across the organization. Learning does not happen in a vacuum. It literally happens across the entire organization. And so getting everyone involved is really crucial to our success. And here's where L&D goes wrong. We assume that everyone sees learning as a priority. They don't. Each department has their own set of urgent things. We try to convince instead of collaborate. People resist when they feel pushed. People engaged when they feel included. And we operate in silos instead of embedding learning within the organization. If learning feels separate from day-to-day tasks, it'll be ignored. So how to manage effectively across the organization? The first thing to do is to find your internal advocates. You don't actually need everyone on board. You just need the right people on board. So let's say a operations leader values your training and you have made a great impact in his or her team. They will advocate for you in leadership meetings that you're not in. The second thing to do is talk in terms of business needs and not training needs. Instead of saying something like, we need HR support to roll out this leadership training, instead say, this will help us reduce turnover, which is currently costing the company X dollars per year. Frame learning as a business solution, not as an HR initiative. And the third thing is be the person who brings solutions, not just responds to requests. If let's say you need IT support on rolling out a new onboarding, don't go to them and say, hey, we need your help with this. Go to them and say, this onboarding initiative will streamline processes, saving your team time. Show how your work makes their work easier. Okay, now we've spoken about managing up, down, across. How do we pull this all together? And as I end off every video, let's talk about your action plan in part 4. This action plan involves 4 clear steps on how you can manage projects and people even without authority. Step 1 is to take control of the project even when it's not yours. So first things first, you need to take control of your work stream. Even if you are just the L&D person, if you are not owning the capability side of the project, you're just going to fail. So the immediate steps you can take is number 1, define your role with clarity. Don't assume people know what L&D is going to do and going to contribute and how long it's going to take. Number 2 is to set clear expectations for dependencies. What input do you need? What budget do you need? Who do you need to speak with? And so on and so forth. Number 3 is to ask to be included in key meetings. So yes, you might not be invited like I was, but I made a mistake where I didn't ask to be included in those meetings. I should have heard firsthand of delays, of other things happening, because there was a lot of things happening that I should have known about, that I should have been supporting in terms of capability building for those teams. And number 4 is to create a simple project tracking system. If you are not working in something like Asana or Monday.com, create your own. There are so many free tools, but this will help you immensely stay on track and continue to be proactive and adding that value along the way. And here's my pro tip for you. Take 5 minutes after every meeting just to summarize what happened. And yes, maybe you can send everyone an email, but it's especially important for you to make sure that you are staying on track and keeping all the balls in the air that need to be in the air. Okay, then the next part of your action plan is rallying all the people around you. And one of our biggest missteps is trying to convince everyone that they need this learning instead of making them feel like part of the initiative so that they also feel that sense of ownership. So your immediate action plan is, number 1 is to get buy-in from your key stakeholders. Before you roll out anything, have one-to-one conversations with the key players and make sure all of you are on the same page. The second thing, and I will say this again, is to use the business language and not our L&D jargon. If a leader comes to you and says, we need people to start thinking more critically, you don't turn around and say, okay, we are launching a problem-solving module. Say instead, this will help your team sharpen their decision-making so they waste less time fixing mistakes. The third thing you're going to do is make the business case. Instead of pushing training, you position learning as a performance enabler. Like saying, if we equip leaders with better feedback skills, we can reduce turnover by X%. And fourth is to give stakeholders a role in the success. People don't do what they are forced to do. They do what they feel like they co-created. So instead of just announcing a training program, ask, how can we make this work for your team? That way, they co-own the rollout. And my pro tip for this section is, instead of expecting buy-in, ask for input. The third step in your action plan is to drive execution without authority. And here's where most projects fail. It wasn't because there wasn't a good plan, but it was because things stalled. People got busy, priorities shifted, and because no one technically reports into you, you cannot demand updates. So instead, you're leading with influence to keep the momentum going. And here are some immediate things that you can do. Number 1 is to make action the easiest option. If you need a manager to debrief their teams, write the email for them. If you need IT's help to roll out an onboarding program, draft a one-pager checklist of things you need their help with. Reduce friction wherever you can. Number 2 is to use nudge leadership. So instead of chasing people, follow up reminding them of the impact. So something like, hey, the faster we finalize this module, the faster we can get new hires up to speed. Any chance we can wrap this up by Friday? The third thing is to call out and celebrate progress publicly. An example could be, hey, thanks so much to Sarah for getting this recruitment timeline up to us. This is a huge unlock for the training, because recognition fuels momentum. And fourth is to anticipate any roadblocks before they happen. At least every week, have a look at that project timeline and look for things that might delay you. Are there any other teams not meeting deadlines? Are there any other resources that you need? Do you need foster approvals perhaps? And then proactively flag the risks so that you're not firefighting later. Okay, so now you've got the project set up, you've got all the buy-in, and you're keeping the execution on track. But the real leadership isn't about managing this one project. It is about consistently showing up day to day and leading the function. And so the fourth step in your action plan is to build the reputation as the person that makes things happen. Your ultimate goal isn't to deliver one successful project. It is to build yourself up as a trusted leader in the organization. So here, your immediate action plan is to document and showcase your impact. Have a wins folder where you document and track all of your big business initiatives. Use this when you are making a case for budget and resources, or better yet, promotions. Number 2 is to stay visible in the leadership circles. Even if you are not in those executive meetings, find ways to contribute. Maybe you're going to share some insights or the results from your most recent project. Number 3 is to strengthen those relationships across all the departments. Follow up. Ask them what worked, what didn't work, how can we improve next time? And last but not least is to position yourself as a strategic leader and not just a learning provider. A great example is you can proactively ask how you can help. For example, you can go to a leader and say, hey, I noticed we're expanding into this new market. Should we discuss skills readiness for that expansion? And here is one of my biggest pro tips. Send a short impact report after every single project. Thank everyone who contributed and engaged. Show the business impact. Thank you for this. It was such a success. We reduced turnover by 20%, saving the company X amount. And that you're excited to continue supporting the business through capability. And even if you don't see the numbers, still send those impact reports, because you can say, we put this initiative in place, perhaps you did new onboarding and it didn't quite reduce time to competence. Say that. Say, we implemented onboarding, we didn't see the results, and here is our recommendation of what we can do to fix this going forward. This will absolutely solidify your credibility as a business leader. Okay, let's wrap this up. You do not need a leadership title to lead. You do not need direct reports to influence. What you need is the ability to take ownership. Align people around a shared vision, execute with precision, and show your impact. L&D is absolutely not just about training. It is about transformation. And transformation, it requires leadership. So step up, take control, and lead from where you are. I would love to know your one action that you are going to take from this video. Leave it in the comments and let's truly have a conversation around it, because it is our time. It is our time to move away from support function and into this transformational space. And I absolutely love that for us. And on a last note, okay, let's talk about when things go wrong, when things don't go according to plan. And that is exactly what we're chatting about in the next episode. I cannot wait to see you there. Bye for now.